So welcome to today's presentation, reviewing some of REDCap's features, tips, and tricks to hopefully help you with your research project. My name is Jeff Richardson, one of the REDCap administrators for Lifespan and data coordinator in the Lifespan Biostatistics, Epidemiology, and Research Design Core. I'd like to thank Iman Hussein for her help today from Brown University Advance-CTR. For getting this and other classes scheduled and on books. Our learning objectives today include features, tips, and tricks for customizing the data entry experience, customizing the researcher experience, and staff experience, and then we'll end with some other general suggestions and leave time for Q&A at the end. We probably won't be covering anything particularly mind-blowing today, but I hope you all hopefully leave here with a couple new ideas to implement in your own projects. Some of this stuff is going to be a review for some of you, but I'm going to try to move quickly through each topic to leave time at the end for questions. I'm still putting we can have handouts to send out at the end of the presentation today. That'll go over everything we're going to discuss here. So we're going to begin today with tips for customizing the data entry experience. And this is going to include a brief overview of piping, field embedding, matrix, field matrices, field validation, quasi-required fields, and action tags. And then we're going to cover tips to customize the REDCap experience for researchers. These topics are going to include a discussion on data structure, wide versus long format, alerts and notifications, custom record labels and dashboards and reports. And finally, we're going to finish with some general advice and suggestions, including moving your project to production, copying your project to explore, preventing abandoned projects, deleting old projects, disabling your autofill settings, and then some questions and answers at the end. So again, here's what we're going to cover in part one, and we're going to try to get through a lot today, so we're going to get right into it with piping. Piping is a way that using square brackets to essentially take a data value and display it somewhere else. Somewhere like a field label or an email text. So a great way to learn about piping is to create a new project using the piping example project template. You can use the template and then scroll down to start a new project and scroll down to find the piping project. Here's a look at the online designer view for the piping example project. The first question is the variable name. Remember that piping is taking a data value and displaying it somewhere else. So you can see the first name variable in the square brackets is set to be displayed elsewhere on the survey. Here we have a blank data entry form from the piping template project. And on the right, you can see the completed data entry form. Notice that the value for first name is being displayed elsewhere, and similarly for vanilla ice cream. Now we're going to look, see how this looks to the participant. Here we're filling out the form, and the items we entered previously are already showing up here. And here's a little summary of everything. One more time. So we're going to, when you enter the values in, these values are getting piped into the next fields here. All right, we're going to get right into field embedding, which is a feature that uses curly brackets to give you greater control over the look and feel of your data collection instruments. Unlike piping, which deals with a data value, with field embedding, you're moving the entire field element itself to somewhere else on the page. So we're going to start with a use case. Suppose we create an instrument that collects first and last name along with email address and age for mother, father, and child. Here's what the user sees when completing the survey. The questions have already occupied the length of the entire page. And in the next slide, we'll see how to arrange the questions in a more user-friendly manner with field embedding. I'm going to demonstrate how to set up field embedding for this instrument. You must always first create all the variables that you want embedded, and we've already done that. After this demonstration, we're going to review each of the steps that I'm going to go through one by one. So you start by clicking Add Field, and you want to add a descriptive text field. And then click on Use the Rich Text Editor, and then you want to click that table to set up the dimensions of your form. In this case, we're going to do 4 by 4. And here, let's see if let me try to fast forward this. Well, anyway, so on the here's on the top row is the labels, and here, so I'm creating with the elements inside is using the field embedding to move these elements into this table to display it in an easier fashion for the participants. And bear with me for this slow. Almost there. So this gives you a good example of actually how it is going to, the work that has to be done to set it up. But once it's set up in this fashion, it's going to be a lot easier to enter. So now that's okay. So we're just going to move on. So again, I set up a descriptive text field using Rich Text Editor, clicked on the table icon, and select the number of rows and columns for the table. Once it's been created, you can set up the table to display the proper field labels, and use curly brackets to surround the variable names, and give the entire table itself a variable name, and click Save. When a field has been embedded properly, you're going to see these green notifications that the field is embedded elsewhere on the page. And this is the view that the user is going to see when completing the survey. Everything has been arranged nicely, and it's taking up a fraction of the survey space of having the questions listed one after another. You can make further adjustments to customize the table to make the columns wider or narrower, and you can even remove the table borders, which I'll go through quickly. You can highlight the entire table and right-click the mouse and click Cell Properties. And then here you click Advanced. And in the Advanced tab, you have the option to select border style. And in the top example, the borders have been hidden. And in the bottom example, the table has a solid border. So another example, field embedding. We have a couple checkbox fields. One is asking for favorite pie, and the other is asking for favorite pizza topping. Each of the question has an option for other, and additional text fields have been created to capture the other items. Branching logic was added so that these fields only appear when other has been selected. And here's what the user sees when completing the survey. The other pie and other pizza fields disappear when the other selection is not clicked. So this takes up an entire page length of the survey for just these 2 questions. And we're going to show how field embedding can improve on this. So we can embed the text field for other pie variable name among the choices for the favorite pie variable. And the same for pizza, we can embed the variable pizza underscore of right next to the other option for favorite pizza topping. So this is the survey view. You'll notice that the text field has been embedded within the original questions for the other. So it's not taking up that extra space for that question. But we can take this a little bit further. And we can embed the 2 checkbox fields to appear right next to each other. We've created a 2x2 table. The header row contains each question, and the bottom row contains the embedded variables inside of curly brackets. When set up this way, here's how the survey will now appear. Note that the length of the survey has been cut in half from a full page to a half a page. Remember that the fields must first exist before you can go try to embed them elsewhere. There's also a project template for field embedding that I encourage you to explore to see more examples. We're going to move right into matrix of fields, or a grid of fields, and why would we want to create one? So here's an example of a survey that does not use a matrix, a field matrix, but would benefit from one. This is the General Anxiety Disorder 7-item survey, the GAD-7. And you can see there's a lot of scrolling for just these 7 questions. This could be especially burdensome if there's 10, 20, or more questions. But notice that the responses, not at all several days, over half, nearly every day, these are all the same for every question. And so that's going to be required when you want to make a field matrix. So here you can see all the same questions asked in the GAD-7, but now arranged in a grid. This can be much less imposing to the person taking the survey. The 7 questions now take up about half of 1 page length, or about the 1/4 of the space as it did in the prior slide. To get started, to create a matrix within the online designer, click Add Matrix of Fields. And here you can set the matrix header text, the field labels, variable names, column choices, and other matrix information, including the answer format. Is it going to be a ranked matrix, which means, do you want to limit it to 1 choice allowed per column? And remember, you have to include a matrix group name. But the field matrix can be very important for helping prevent that survey fatigue and helping your participants answer more questions if you have a lengthy survey. We're going to get into field validation now. And it's an easy way to avoid unnecessary data collection errors is to use field validation whenever possible. You can think of this infant or this baby as your participants, and the box is your REDCap data collection instrument. You'll be surprised how it can get screwed up and people will answer in ways you haven't thought of. So field validation in this analogy would be the equivalent to preventing the top of the box from being removed. Field validation ensures that for certain fields, a user doesn't enter an incorrect data type. And if they do, an error message will pop up and ask them the mistake is corrected. You can validate for dates and times. Anyone who's worked with data knows how frustrating it can be to have text fields where dates should be. You can set the minimum and maximum allowable dates to include in your date range. You want to use field validations for email addresses, numbers and integers, where you can also set minimum and maximum allowable values. If you want the response to have letters only, or an MRN, phone number, zip codes. This is a really easy way to prevent data entry errors and should be used every time the situation allows. So now we're going to talk about quasi-required fields. So most of you already know that REDCap has the ability to make certain fields required, but sometimes due to the sensitive nature of a question, it may be inappropriate to force an answer from participants. So what do you do when you have a sensitive question, but you really want participants to answer, but you don't want to make the field mandatory? One solution is to create these, what I call quasi-required fields. It's just a little technique. So, excuse me. Suppose we really want to know about alcohol abuse in the household, but we don't want to make this required. We just want to be sure that people don't mistakenly, unintentionally skip that question. So a solution is to add a descriptive text field with branching logic set so that it only appears if the alcohol question is blank, while the question that follows is not blank. And there's the logic set up. And so we're going to see that in action now. If they skip that question and move on, our error message pop-up is going to appear, and it'll disappear when they answer that question. We'll get right into action tags now. We'll go a brief overview of action tags, which are an excellent way to customize the data entry experience for surveys and forms. They are special terms that begin with the @ sign that could be placed inside a field's field annotation when adding or editing a field. Each action tag has its corresponding action that is performed for the field when displayed on data entry forms and survey pages. We'll look at the different types of action tags, list the action tags for each type, and go over a few examples. So the types of action tags, there are autofill tags, which pre-fill a variable with a value. Cosmetic tags that change the look and feel of a variable without impacting the data. The entry limit limits what can be entered in a variable. External module tags added by an external module. Mobile app tags that are useful only when using the mobile app. And there's concealing tags, which are action tags that either outright hide or a variable or make it uneditable. Here are some of the different action tags that correspond with each type. Autofill tags, cosmetic, entry limit tags, and concealing tags. So these are some of the ones that you could consider using. I didn't include some of the ones for the mobile app or the external modules because they're sort of more specialized, but I'm going to go over just a couple of these next to show an example. We're going to look at an example takes advantage of two action tags, max checked and none of the above. On the left, we have a checkbox fields that allows for multiple answers. What is your favorite ice cream? And you can see that we've already defined the action tags. Max checked equals 4 and none of the above equals 8. By setting max check to 4, REDCap will issue a warning if the user tries to select a 5th flavor for your favorite ice cream. And you can see the error message there that you can't select that. The max number of choices have been selected, and that's because we set max check to 4. Now, if we don't want a user to be able to enter contradictory information, we'd like to prevent someone, for instance, from selecting chocolate, vanilla, and I don't like ice cream as their favorite ice creams. So by setting none of the above, so by setting none of the above, you, it'll prevent those incompatible choices. Okay, so now we've reached part 2 of 3, and we're going to look at some features that can help the researchers and staff have a better experience with REDCap. And we'll get right into the data structure, looking at wide data versus long data format. So data structure is really how the rows and columns of your data set are organized to handle specific study design. We're going to contrast the wide data format versus long format by looking at 2 different methods of setting up a REDCap project for data collection. Both methods are valid and acceptable and gather all the required data, but each of them stores the data in a very different manner, which can have an impact on how analyzable it is. So suppose we're conducting a research project that collects some demographic data and it administers a survey at baseline. We also want to administer the same survey again at 1 month and again at 3 months for each participant. You might be tempted to set up your project like this. You have 1 instrument to collect the demographic data, and then you have 3 versions of the same survey to be administered at each of the different time points, baseline, 1 month, and 3 months. In this setup, longitudinal data collection has not been enabled. It's not needed. And this is what the record status dashboard looks like after a participant has completed the entire survey, the entire program. So setting your project in this manner stores the data in the wide format shown here. There is 1 row per participant, and repeat columns are used to handle the repeated measures. So you can see some have a underscore 3 month at the end, some have an underscore 1 month at the end. And so this, now a survey with just 8 questions and administered 3 times. And when you export this data to Excel, you're going to already be into the column labeled AK. So you've passed Z and you're onto AK already. So you can imagine if this was given more time points or if there were more questions, how wide that data can actually get. The pros of this data structure is that it can work very well with certain study designs. For instance, a pre-post design that measures 1 outcome before and after an intervention. The cons are that the outcomes live in numerous columns. It's hard to summarize. You can't make a chart of this easily in Excel. This can quickly get clunky and difficult to manage with many outcomes over many events, and can be a limitation for analysis. So an alternative and superior way, we would argue, of setting up the same project is to create your demographics instrument and only include 1 copy of the survey you intend to administer. You're going to use longitudinal data collection with defined events. And so here, our events have been defined. When we click define our events, we've got baseline, month 1 and month 3. And instruments have been designated for each event. The demographics instrument only needs to be administered at baseline. but this survey is going to get administered at each event. So this will appear in the record status dashboard like this after the participant completes the program. It's very similar to the record status dashboard in the earlier version we looked at. But the big difference is going to be in how the data is stored. Here we see the same information collected for one participant, but the data is in the long format. So there can be numerous rows per person. And the pros of this long format is that it's just one column per outcome. So it's easier to summarize over time. You can see the same data as the last one, but we can fit all the data in this one on one page. If we want to add another visit, it only requires adding a new row rather than adding many new columns. So this is fast and flexible, and in most cases is the gold standard for data collection. And given the chance, this longitudinal study design with the designated events to create output in the long format is ideal and preferential to copying and creating multiple instances of the same instrument. Moving along, we'll explore the alerts and notifications feature, which allows you to construct alerts and send customized notifications. These notifications may be sent to one or more participants and can be triggered or scheduled when a form or survey is saved and or based on conditional logic whenever data is saved or imported. While similar in many respects to automated survey invitations, alerts and notifications allow for greater complexity and have more capabilities. For example, they apply to both data entry forms and surveys, and they also allow for more options regarding who can be the recipient of a notification. And this includes project users, so staff, data entry folks, as well as survey participants. To get started with creating alerts, click Alerts and Notifications, and then click the Add New Alert button to view all the settings that must be defined for a given alert. Once it's been created, it immediately becomes active and may be triggered at any time thereafter. Step one for creating a new alert is to decide how the alert will be triggered. So you can choose between, have it triggered when a record is saved on a form, or you could use conditional logic. Step two is to decide when to send the alert and how often, as well as if the alert should have an expiration date. So you can see here some of those options. And then step three is the final step is to decide who to send to. You can use fields from your data collection instruments that have been validated as email fields, or you can hard code an email address into the alert. Alerts can be set up as internal reminders for staff to do certain tasks. Here are the settings for step three. And we're going to go through an example alert. So suppose we want to know immediately whenever a certain question is answered in a certain way. Here we have a question that asks if a participant has been feeling suicidal. And one of the responses is all of the time. So if we're going to ask such a question, we should be prepared to act if someone answers that they have been suicidal all of the time. So we can create an alert and have it triggered when this postpartum depression scale is complete and the participant has chosen this value for the question that asks about suicide. We can have the alerts sent to a research staff or perhaps a social worker with a message to follow up with that subject. A record of the alert will be stored in the notification log, and here's what the alert looks like when they open their email. Next, we're going to talk about discuss custom record labels, which allow you to view additional information from within the record status dashboard. So this is what a standard record dashboard looks like. It lists the record ID and whether the survey has been completed. Sometimes it may be advantageous to be able to see additional information here. Maybe I'd like to know at a glance the gender and group for each record, but without having to click into each record to find out. So REDCap allows you to set a custom record label to append other data and/or static text next to any record name. From the project setup page, click on additional customizations, and then set a custom record label. And you can define the custom record label here. So we're piping in using those square brackets, group, and then comma space, and the sex. And now this is how the record labels look in the record status dashboard. Every record is shown with the group now and the sex, and so we're not going to have to click into those to learn about them. So notice that every record is shown in ascending order. Suppose you want to see them in descending order. Let's say you have 1,000 cases and you don't want to have to click through each page to get to the most recent entry. Or maybe you'd like to only see a subset of the records. In that case, you may want to explore the custom record dashboard. You can create your own custom record status dashboard by clicking Create Custom Dashboard. And you have the ability to include or exclude specific instruments, filter the records displayed based on conditional logic, or sort the records by the value of a specific field in either ascending or descending order. So for an example, let's create a custom dashboard that only displays participants who are female in Group C and over 50 years old, and displays those records in descending order of record ID. So here we set our values for the title, and going to set the filter logic. Here's where we set the sex as female, group is Group C, and the age is over 50. And define how we want it sorted, and then click Save. And here we can see our new dashboard, custom dashboard. And if we want, we can switch between the default dashboard and the new one we just created. We're going to look next at REDCap reports and how to create reports in REDCap. To create a new report, click on Data Exports, Reports, and Stats section and click the Create a New Report. And then it's a 4-step process. Step 1 is user access, choosing who can edit and view the report. You want to choose which fields to include in the report, choose which filters, if any, and how you want the results ordered. There's also a link here to a nice 5-minute video on how to use the data exports, reports, and stats. And this and other videos like it within REDCap are always very helpful. So we're going to go through each of these steps one at a time. For step 1, there are 2 types of user access, view access and edit access, who can view or edit the reports. For step 2, you want to choose which fields to include in your report. You can add all fields from an instrument at once by clicking the drop down shown here, or you can click the quick add button here to quickly add certain select fields from each instrument. Before you get to step 3, there's a space to choose additional report options. By default, the option is already checked to remove line breaks, carriage returns from all text data values. You have the option to include the survey identifier field and survey timestamp. And the other option there is to combine the checkbox options into a single column, which I'm going to review on the next slide. So we have previously created a checkbox field for selecting favorite ice cream, and now we want to create a report with first and last name as well as the favorite ice cream flavors for each participant. Here's what the output looks like without selecting the option to combine checkbox fields. And here's what the output looks like when you do select combine checkbox fields. And notice it's just a much cleaner, more readable results. So step 3 of the 4-step process for creating reports is to choose which filters to include, if any. Again, so REDCap is filled with these helpful links, like the one shown here, and feel free to click that to learn more about the filter logic. But in reports, you can add as many filters as you wish, and you can get quite complex with the filter logic using multiple fields with and or logic, conditional logic. To add a filter, select a field that you wish to filter on, after which you will need to set both an operator and a value. And here we'll set up the filter logic to show participants who are female, 50 years of age or older, and belonging to group C. And then the last step, step 4, is how do you want the results order? And for the fun, we're just going to order these results descending by age. After we click save, you get confirmation that your report was saved, and you can now view the report that we created. And here it is, group C, females over 50. And you can see the data that we asked for there. So those are REDCap reports. And we finally reached part 3, the general advice and suggestions portion. So we're almost finished now, and we're going to end with just some general tips and advice. To prevent yourself from making any catastrophic changes to your project, we recommend that you move your project into production once you have completed setting everything up and are ready for data collection to begin. We always recommend that people do this because it helps safeguard projects from users unintentionally deleting data when making changes. Moving your project to production once you start collecting study data ensures you're maintaining data accuracy and integrity, and the post-production change control process provides an additional check to ensure that the data which has already been collected is not deleted, recoded, or overwritten unintentionally. You can still move your project to production even if data collection has already begun, as REDCap will give you the option to keep the existing data or delete it. So you can enter as much practice fake data as you want, and then when you're ready to move to production, you can either keep or delete that data. So a quick quiz: is the following statement true or false? If I move my project into production, I will no longer be able to make changes to it. This answer is false, even though we've heard from several users who have been under this impression. Changes can be made to your project once in production by going to Online Designer and entering draft mode. Once in draft mode, you can make whatever changes you need. And once submitted, if the changes won't affect any existing data, they'll be approved automatically. If the changes may affect your data in any way, they'll be routed to the REDCap admin team for review and approval. And it can take anywhere from a few minutes to a couple hours to get those changes reviewed and approved. That's monitored every day. So next is to copy your project prior to making changes. You do want to be better safe than sorry. So suppose you want to know if the changes I want to make some changes, but is it going to alter the data that I've already collected? So we can make a copy of our project to experiment in while leaving the original project untouched. From the Other Functionality tab, you want to click on Copy the Project and rename it, and then you'll have the option to copy over other settings if you want to copy the data as well, or other users and user roles. You can try, then once it's been created, you can try whatever you'd like with the comfort of knowing that no harm is going to come to the original. The next tip is to help prevent your project from becoming abandoned. We frequently have people request access to a project, but the PI has moved on to another institution and there were no other users added, or the other users are gone as well. So the best practice is to always at least include 2 people, at least, with project setup and design rights. And so to do this, you want to click on user rights, and then add new users by clicking add with custom rights, and ensure that the user has access to project design and setup, as well as the user rights privileges. This will enable that user to assign someone else to take over the project should the PI leave and someday somebody else wants to have access to the data. Here's some more options for adding a new user to the project. Be sure to click Add User after selecting all the options you want. In order to increase space on the server and to reduce the frequency of unanticipated downtime related to shortage of disk space, please review and delete any old or unused projects. And to do so, simply go to the Other Functionality tab and click Delete Project. And then finally, there have been compliance issues that have been reported recently relating to the inadvertent disclosure of PHI caused by enabled autofill, auto sign-in, and password save web browser settings. So specifically, when research participants were entering data into a REDCap survey fields, identifying information belonging to other research participants was populated. This issue is not a REDCap issue, it's rather an issue caused by having enabled settings on your web browser. So the action offered by the Office of Research and Compliance was to ensure that autofill and save passwords and auto sign-in settings are all disabled. Consider using an alternate web browser for participant surveys. Again, just ensure that the features described above are disabled. And it is strongly encouraged to have specific research devices for when administering participant surveys for the participant only, instead of shared devices. So that's it for the presentation portion. Thank you everybody for attending. If you ever have any questions, you can email them to redcapsupport@lifespan.org.